Okay, picture this, a canoe race between a Japanese company and an American company. They both train relentlessly, but on race day, the Japanese team absolutely crushes it, winning by a mile. The American team is devastated, right? So they do what any large organization does, they form a management committee to investigate. And what they find is actually pretty shocking. The Japanese team had 8 people rowing and 1 person steering. The American team, 8 people steering and 1 person rowing. So, how does American management fix this? Naturally, they hire consultants. And these consultants recommend a massive reorganization, 4 steering supervisors, 3 area steering superintendents, and an assistant superintendent steering manager. Oh, and they give the one poor guy actually rowing a new quality performance program, complete with some free company pens. The next year, the Japanese team wins by 2 miles. So management lays off the rower for poor performance and hands out executive bonuses with the savings. Look, it's a hilarious and, slightly exaggerated story, but it perfectly hits the nail on the head when it comes to the sheer absurdity of blindly applying restructuring fads without actually understanding how to manage people and resources.
Welcome to this explainer on managerial skills and practices for global leadership. Today we're unpacking the real complexities of modern management because, let's face it, we live in a highly connected global environment now, and those days of just copy-pasting rigid, culturally blind management techniques, they are totally over. You literally cannot just drag and drop a strategy from one side of the globe to the other and expect it to magically work. You've really got to understand the people, the processes, and crucially, the cultural programming that actually drives human behavior.
And right at the core of our journey today is a really foundational philosophy. Effective managers are the ones who think with their heads, act with their hearts, and demonstrate through their habits. It's like a 3-legged stool. Management isn't just about spreadsheets and org charts, that's the head part. It's also deeply about morale, relationships, and empathy. That's your heart. And then there are the daily, consistent behaviors you show your team. Those are your habits.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The core of management. 2. The evolution of management thought. 3. The impact of culture. 4. The language of time. 5. Cultural dilemmas and decisions. And finally, 6. Leading the global workforce. We're taking a journey from the absolute basics of getting things done all the way to navigating some genuinely fascinating cultural dilemmas. So let's jump right in.
Section 1. The core of management. Getting things done. Okay, let's dive into this. Before we add the incredibly complex layer of international culture, we really need to establish what management actually is at its baseline. And it comes down to 4 classic functions: plan, organize, lead, and control. Planning is simply figuring out your goals and your strategy. Organizing is deciding who does what and how tasks are grouped. Leading is where you motivate your team, direct them, and resolve conflicts. And controlling? That's just monitoring performance and making those necessary course corrections. No matter what culture you're in, these 4 things are always happening. But sitting right alongside these functions are 2 absolutely critical concepts: effectiveness and efficiency.
Now, management requires you to optimize both of these, but they are very, very different beasts. Efficiency is all about doing things right, using the absolute least amount of resources to hit a goal. Effectiveness, on the other hand, is doing the right things, actually picking the correct goals in the first place. You know, you could have a team that's incredibly efficient at building a bridge, right? 0 material waste, finished in record time. But if they build that beautiful bridge over a river where literally no one needs to cross, well, they haven't been effective at all. To really succeed, a manager absolutely has to be both efficient and effective.
Moving on to Section 2. Evolution of management thought. From machines to minds. It's wild to think about how drastically our view of the workforce has changed over the last century. Back in the 1890s, Frederick Taylor introduced scientific management. He basically thought there was one single best way to do any physical task, essentially treating human beings like programmable machines. Then in the 1910s, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth brought in time and motion studies, literally filming workers to streamline every tiny physical movement. Henri Fayol gave us those original functions of management around the same time. But then, things started to really shift. In the 1920s, Mary Parker Follett completely broke the mold. She argued that there is no one best way. Management is actually situational, and communication has to be a two-way street. This was a massive, game-changing paradigm shift from a mechanical view to a truly human-centric one.
Now, what's really fascinating about this evolution is how it leads us straight into the Hawthorne effect. So, between 1924 and 1933, researchers at the Western Electric Company wanted to see if better lighting increased factory worker productivity. They turned the lights up, and hey, productivity went up. But then they turned the lights down, and productivity still went up. Why? Because it wasn't the lights at all. It was the fact that someone was actually paying attention to the workers. They were being observed, noticed, and cared about. This single study fundamentally shifted management philosophy from the idea of the economic man to the social man, proving that human relations are deeply, inextricably tied to output.
Which brings us to Section 3, the impact of culture, the invisible hand.
Navigating diverse, complex, global cultures is pretty much the ultimate test for managers today. Culture acts like this invisible hand, guiding the entire workplace. Researcher Geert Hofstede famously defined culture as the collective programming of the mind. I just love that phrasing, collective programming. It drives human behavior in a really consistent, predictable way. But here's the absolute kicker. Because this programming gets embedded deep into our subconscious when we're kids, we are almost always completely unaware of our own cultural conditioning. We just assume our way of doing things is normal or logical, and then we end up totally confused when another culture operates differently.
Let's look at Section 4, the language of time, Hall and Hall's orientations.
To see just how deep this cultural programming really goes, think about how different cultures experience a ticking clock. Researchers Hall and Hall identified two totally distinct orientations here. In monochronic cultures, like the US or Germany, time is strictly linear. You do one thing at a time. Time is almost a physical object for us, right? We talk about spending it, saving it, wasting it. Deadlines are absolutely rigid. Contrast that with polychronic cultures, like you find in many parts of Latin America or the Middle East. There, time is fluid. A whole bunch of things are happening all at once. An appointment might shift at the absolute last second because finishing a human transaction or nurturing a relationship is just vastly more important than blindly following a schedule. If a monochronic manager tries to force rigid schedules onto a polychronic team without getting this dynamic, it's just a recipe for immense stress and conflict.
Now for Section 5, cultural dilemmas and decisions, testing your biases.
So, I'm curious, how deep do your own cultural biases go? Let's test it using some brilliant frameworks from Hofstede and Trompanaar. He identified a major tension between what he called universalism and particularism. In universalist cultures, folks believe that general rules, codes, and laws apply equally to absolutely everyone, everywhere, zero exceptions. But in particularist cultures, relationships and context take the front seat. The spirit of the law or the deep bonds of friendship are seen as way more important than the strict letter of the law. Let's look at a real-world scenario to see where you personally land.
Okay, I want you to answer this honestly. You work for a large company. Out of nowhere, your boss asks you to come over and help paint their house this weekend. Do you help? Do you feel a genuine obligation to say yes? Or does your brain immediately go, absolutely no way, my weekend is my time, and this has literally nothing to do with my job? Just lock in your answer for a second. Ready to see how the rest of the world responded? And the global response brilliantly illustrates the divide. Look at the percentage of people who would actively refuse to paint that house. In highly individualist and universalist cultures, the boundary is super clear. 96% of Australians and 89% of Americans said absolutely not. But look at China. Only 28% would refuse. In a particularist, relationship-driven culture, saying no to your boss outside of work hours is viewed completely differently. Your obligations to that specific relationship just don't magically shut down at 5 p.m. on a Friday. But hang on, let's raise the stakes even higher.
Try this ethical dilemma on for size. You're riding in a car with your friend. They are speeding, going 75 in a 45 zone. Suddenly, they accidentally hit a pedestrian. It goes to court, and their lawyer pulls you aside and says, "Don't worry, you are the only witness." So, what do? Do you testify to protect your friend by lying about how fast they were going? Or do you tell the cold, objective truth and basically throw your friend under the bus?
Prepare to be totally amazed by this data. When we look at the percentage of people who flat out refuse to protect their friend, meaning they're going to tell the objective truth to the judge, in the USA, it's 95%. In Germany, 91%. Universal law rules supreme. But as we move over to France, it drops to 68%. And look at South Korea. Only 26% refuse to protect their friend. Think about that. That means a massive 74% of respondents in South Korea would lie under oath to protect their friend. Now, to a universalist, that sounds like shocking corruption. But to a particularist, throwing your lifelong friend in a jail cell just to satisfy a blind, unfeeling legal system is the ultimate betrayal. Neither is inherently wrong, they're just entirely different cultural programming systems operating out there in the real world. Finally, Section 6, Leading the Global Workforce, the Path Forward. So, keeping all these wild differences in mind, how in the world do we actually manage effectively?
Well, the ultimate goal for a global leader is achieving what researchers call transculturation. This is basically the process of adjusting to another cultural environment without sacrificing your own core identity. You don't just completely assimilate and lose who you are, but you also definitely don't stubbornly force your old ways onto everybody else. Instead, you become what's known as a multicultural person. You actually learn to live comfortably right there on the boundary. You start to understand that when a team member is a bit late, they might just be polychronic, not disrespectful. You realize that a particularist employee needs to build a genuine relationship with you before they fully trust your leadership. You adapt.
I really want to wrap up with this incredibly powerful Chinese proverb from the source material. One moment of patience may ward off great disaster. One moment of impatience may ruin a whole life. Navigating global management, unpacking our deeply held cultural biases, and learning to truly lead with your head, your heart, and your habits, it all requires immense, deliberate patience. If you just rush in, blindly applying your own cultural programming, or handing out free pens to a single rower while 8 people steer, you are for sure going to fail. So as you look at your own teams and organizations, ask yourself, are you taking the real time to understand the water you're rowing in, or are you just demanding everyone paddle to your rhythm?